And so, no.
Okay. We have everybody from the city here. I don't know if the Bible school show. So we'll call the meeting order, and can I have an approval of the agenda? Seconder? If you so inclined for second. Second. All those in favor? Yes, great. So the first thing is review the 2024 meeting schedule as circulated in the package. It's a monthly cadence, with the only exception. A deviation from the date would be at the similar. Oh, there we go. Welcome, Rick Rogers. So the only difference is I didn't want to be too close to the holiday session in December, so it's December 17th is a deviation from that cadence. We have every month. Is everybody okay with that? Okay.
Derek,
Go ahead.
Derek, I had trouble hearing you. It was just a little bit muffled. I heard you say, is everybody okay with that? But I didn't hear you say what it was that we were to be okay with. And I'm sorry, I'm not there. I've got something. I'm not 100%.
You sound like you have something, yes.
Yeah.
No worries. It was the cadence of the meetings for the infrastructure committee as stated on the bottom of the agenda. The only deviation on a monthly meeting is the meeting in December is on the third Tuesday, versus all others are on the fourth Tuesday or something like that.
Yeah,
Third Tuesday.
Great.
So everybody's okay with that?
Yeah.
And aware? Any questions on the cadence? No. Okay. Consensus, moving along. Number 4, review of the visioning session, general discussion. I walked away last week feeling very heartened with the good conversation we had, great questions, the turning things over from many different angles and the opinions and thoughts everybody brought, and a great deal of participation. And I mulled this over in my mind over the last week or so. And, at one point leading into last week, I thought, it was necessary to have another meeting at such close proximity to the one we had last week. But I thought, okay, no, I think it is good because we're getting in a position now where with the great deliberation discussion we had, that hopefully we can move to the board with more information and more consensus among us, or more recommendations and an option presented on the discussions we're having around regional infrastructure, including regional aquatics. I guess we'll move forward and talk about some information coming out of that session. What you want to add?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the members, I just want to remind everybody that specifically within the Act and the regulations, that it is the responsibility of this committee to make a recommendation to the board. We don't have to do that today, but just want to remind everybody of what our responsibility is within this. And if there's an option to look at and sort of recommend, a cost sharing model, that strengthens that position in terms of making the recommendation. And how we get there, we have Shahada Zammer, who helped lead us through the session, along with one of his colleagues, Jeff Trail, that's here today. And so really, Mr. Chair, I think in discussion on how people felt around the table on from the committee members on the session in general, and what information and what types of considerations do we need as we move forward towards that recommendation process. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any comments from people around the board? I'm just going to leave one big thing out there. Do you think it's appropriate at this point in time, leading into our next board meeting, that we are in a position, in particular around the regional athletic centers, to discuss or determine from a infrastructure committee, that piece of infrastructure would be considered regional? I just want to throw that in.
Yeah.
For thoughts? Mayor,
Sorry, I should have put up my electronic hand. I'm sorry.
no,
I-
don't worry.
Okay, I totally agree, Derek. I think this is really, like, I feel it's almost like the elephant in the room. Like, let's just determine, is it regional, sub-regional? Like, I think our conversation is certainly that it's regional, and then let's be able to move forward with that, make that determination, and then move forward and have whatever difficult discussions we need to have. But I do believe it's time just to move forward on that determination.
Thank you.
The timing's right, and we have the right expertise and the right spirit. I too really appreciated our last session. I thought it was great.
And I would just add, and we talked about our KPP meetings over this coming year. One of the things that I'd like to see come out of meetings is some action and momentum. I'm not a fan of meeting just to meet, so if we have something we can bring forward to the board for discussion, whether pro or con. It would be great just to leave up there so we can see that we're making progress.
I still feel to see that it's regional. And I say that because of all the small municipalities that are a finger distance away, including the rural. It's made up of several farms. I just can't get this sub-regional out of my head. To be fair to everyone.
Absolutely. Would you say that some of that might be handled from the formula perspective? Cost sharing formula?
Well, I had a little better idea of cost sharing, I guess, the other day, but I don't know how far that went. And I suggested maybe that the ones that are in the negative mileage might pay a little more than the ones that are in the positive mileage distance. I think there's a fairer way, if this is going to be regional, I think there's a little fairer way to get, i.e. Nakawick, Grand Lake, the upper end of Central York, the upper end of Nashwauk, probably your area to some degree, to make this more fair.
From a cost perspective. Go ahead.
So perhaps Mr. Chairman, if she has something, or would you like to wait until maybe the end?
Yeah, on the cost sharing formula after the last session, we added the distance factor. Originally, we had just time, but then the discussion, where folks had mentioned distance would be another factor. So we added the distance and we created the average of the two. So give you an example, Arcadia would be traveling less but more kilometers versus Grand Lake, which is less kilometers, more travel time. So the average makes sense. Now it's the infrastructure committee could inform what percentage discount they would like on that, and that would in a way directly influence the contribution, the financial contribution. In terms of closer folks than the average paying more, I don't see an impact on other than the host community. I don't know if there would be any impact on the other communities. So for example, since the host community would be picking up any discount, that's great for everybody who's getting a discount, but those who are not getting a discount and live closer or are closer, then if they get to pay more, the host community is going to benefit, unless it's going to be a very complex model where. So I don't see a direct impact by closer communities paying more than benefiting the host community. But I don't see a benefit to the others who already get a discount because they're further away.
Okay, I'll take your word for that, where you're the engineer.
I think one of the best things would be to see examples.
So for example, if New Maryland, is paying more because they're, closer to the asset to an asset on 600 Knowledge Park.
Well, they're closer than Fredericton, than overall Fredericton.
Exactly. So they're gonna be paying more, but paying more to who? To the overall pool or to the host community? It gets really complicated if
I didn't think we were paying to the host community. Oh, no. I thought we were paying to the overall construction of the pool, of Fredericton contributing also. Am I wrong on that?
But since the model allows for the host community to pick up any discounts. Is it also fair to say that the host community will pick up also the additional revenue from those that are closer?
So you're saying because, let's use New Maryland as an example, because they would end up paying more with that type of formula. It would go to against the share the host community would have versus reducing the share distributed on
Everybody.
almost everyone.
Yes, because we said the host community is picking up all the discounts. Would it be then they're only picking up the discounts, but the benefit goes to everybody? Or would it be since the host community is picking up the discounts for everybody, they would benefit from those that are closer? So my professional opinion would make the model more complicated without necessarily a benefit to the other communities. It would impact the host more than anybody else. But you can think about it more if you like and give more input if I'm missing something.
So really what it comes down to, when we talk about benefit, it comes to dollars, where the dollars go
Where it comes from.
and where it comes from.
Yeah, the formula aspect to me is different than, I have no problem with formula, working that way. I do have one problem though, is the Capital Region District is made up of 20 LSDs that all have separate budgets. And are not like Burton and Geary that are 10 minutes away from the thing. We're talking Grand Lake, we're talking Charlton, and like that's getting close to an hour away. And rural and places that are all lumped into one group. So when you're figuring out the Google Capital Region, there's 28 different communities that are there. But the other aspect we have to, is the regional and sub-regional. Is it a regional facility or is it a sub-region facility? I'm not sold on the region as of yet, because it's no different than what they had at the UMB, in my opinion. So that's where the whole thing, but the formula aspect, there has to be some needs that way. And because if you're going to ask people to increase your tax base or your taxes on your tax base, you have to be able to sell that to the community. And the sub-regional aspect is a lot easier to sell. So to me, I mean, there's been the experience that we've had in our communities, so in our communities.
So yeah, and Director Forsythe, through you, Mr. Chair, Director Forsythe did share that list with us.
I told this come out too.
Yeah, and we will be sharing that with Shad and his team to be able to try to balance a calculation in there and put that under consideration in terms of that, because it is a vast area. And Kelly, I think you can haul it up there for Director Rogers to be able to see as well. Mr. Chair, see Director Rogers says it.
I think, if I might, I mean, from my perspective, if we're gonna talk regional I think it all boils down to the formula, and I love to see a formula where regional and sub-regional are just boiled into the formula such that the formula is fair enough that if you're far enough away and you have these types of assets, maybe you're zero, but you're still in it. So if you can imagine, you get enough credits that you're still part of the regional process, but the credits grant you to a point where you pay zero. And that could, then that applies sub-regionally as well. So again, it's finding the right formula in my mind that works for everybody so that even Fredericton, if I build a new arena and Fredericton's got 7 of them, the formula is probably gonna net them out. And that's fair. I get that because they don't want to pay for an arena that I have. But if you can boil it into the formula, then we don't have to worry about regional, sub-regional, because the formula is going to take care of it.
Director Rogers?
Thank you. So I guess as I think about, is it regional, sub-regional? I'm thinking if an aquatic center is not regional, I don't really know what is, because none of us have none of us have within the region a competitive pool, except Ormocto, which doesn't have full use of it. The municipality doesn't own it. Obviously, it's based and so it has limited access. But none of us have a pool that can service competitive programming. Once UNB closes, that's over. So if you have people in your communities, regardless of where they are in the region, if they want to do competitive swimming, they're going to have to travel to this pool. So to me, that's what makes it regional, is it really will be one of a kind. It's really one of these assets that no one else has, right? And I agree that I think we have to work out a cost sharing formula that makes sense, because I don't want people, to me, this is all about fairness. Regional Service Commission needs to be premised on fairness, and I want us to feel that it's fair. But I struggle with why we wouldn't think that this one of all would be regional, because like I say, nobody else has it. And something that we need to remember about the competitive piece, competitive programming isn't supposed to be paid for by municipalities. That's provincial funding covers competitive sports. So I don't know how if we don't, as municipalities, it's not our responsibility to be delivering infrastructure for competitive. That a lot of what we heard of, I guess maybe I should backtrack. A lot of what we heard of when we were looking at a pool is people saying, look, we need to be able to develop the competitive athletes, and they need certain parameters in order to develop the competitive athlete, right? And so I'm not saying that is Kate. I'm just simply saying that that's something that was told to us over and over. So that's why this aquatic center has certain features, and it's why it's expensive, and we really only need one of them in our region. But if there's only one, I think it should be regional. I guess that's it. And if people are concerned with the fairness and the cost, let's figure it out with the formula.
And I would just add one of the important things has to go back to the guidelines were given by the British government in terms of making determinations around regional, because there are steps that the province will take for us, potentially, with their powers, from a regional perspective. So it's I won't use the word manifest destiny in saying that. That's a term, right?
Yeah, just I think an important point of clarification, like we use, like the word competitive gets used incorrectly, in my opinion, plenty of times when we get into talking about infrastructure. A pool's a pool, a rink's a rink. A ball field's a ball field. Depending on the size and scope of any one facility, it will allow you to do different things in that, in terms of levels. So, we often hear the competitive groups advocating the most for a facility because they tend to be organized, right? But, and so but a 50-meter pool, and it's I think it's important, for us to realize. And our consultant that did the previous feasibility study, if you read through that, I would argue they incorrectly label that as a competitive tank, a 50-meter pool. A lot of consultants do that. It's a 50-meter tank that allows for multiple uses, much better than a 25-meter tank. Okay, so you can hold long course competitive swimming, short course competitive swimming, family swimming, learn to swimming. You can do it much more efficiently than a 25-meter pool. It's more than a competitive pool. And the same way as this 25-meter 10-lane pool is much more than a competitive pool. I think it's important because if you compare any of our community rinks, they can be competitive or non-competitive based on the size of the ice surface. So I guess we want to keep that in mind.
I totally agree with that, because when you say competitive, and I've been competitive in all sports, as organization aspects, and even in Fredericton, the midget AAA team players, be the top teams in plan, each player pays $8,500 belong to that program. Versus and the competitive swimmers that are pushing the pool, they pay so much. That's part of being in the group. It's just not the competitive pool. As if we had a Canada Games swimming in summer or winter? Summer. Okay, if swimming is in the summer Canada Games, and to provide the facility that they need for that is a what? Would you know?
Well, right now,
50 or
well,
25?
it could be both. It's up to the host jurisdiction, along with the Canada Games Council, to make those decisions.
So we have one, St. John, which is a 50.
Historically, it's been a 50 because, but it's slowly changing, right? Like there's, so that's why you can't label, or we shouldn't be labeling a 50-meter pool or any pool for that matter as a competitive pool, unless we're going to do it for all recreational amenities.
So
Really?
how do we get around the user? Because look, I completely agree, and it's what my thinking would have been until we started getting user groups coming at us and advocating. And we've been told that the pool that our Fredericton indoor pool that we have, that we spend a lot of money to maintain, and it gets used a lot. We're told repeatedly that pool does not meet the criteria for competitive swimming. So that competitive swimmers need to have a larger, and 25, 50, I don't want to, that's not the debate that we're having today. It's rather a piece of infrastructure that serves the athlete that wants to take the competitive route. And so I guess that's what I'm getting at. I'm not putting the labels on. I'm merely relaying information that's being, given to us. And I think it's one of the reasons we went down this path of building another pool. And I would just say, if we're doing it regionally, it will be the only one of its type in the region. And that's why it should be considered a regional asset as opposed to sub-regional.
Yeah, like I agree with that point in terms of, it probably is a regional. The other, but one thing we can think about, and an experience I've had in other regions where we've looked at recreation leadership and cost sharing of recreation leadership, is we looked at those areas within a region or a sub-region that are kind of on the peripheries. And we considered the fact that these boundaries are arbitrary in a lot of instances, and we didn't want to make an arbitrary boundary a decision on whether you pay or not. So there has been instances within the province in the past where a community or jurisdiction that's close to a arbitrary boundary really goes outside their region for services based on distance, right? I don't know if that's the case within this region or not, but if it is, that could be a determinant we wish to consider in deciding whether it's truly a like full-blown regional facility, or, you know, if there are those peripheral jurisdictions that go elsewhere for swimming or whatever it's gonna be, that could be a consideration we wish to look at.
So in that respect, since focusing on regional aquatics center as an example, you know, would be more so the southern part going towards St. John.
Yeah, and probably like, you know, and again, you folks know the region, the boundary better than I, it's probably, like, I can't think of where that would come into play for aquatics. But like when we look at the Fundy region and the what is it, RSC 8 next door, like there's some instances where that is very prevalent, right? Where you might be in RSC 8, but you go to St. John, or vice versa, you go to Quisping, you know. But I'm not sure if that's the case here, but something that we may want to consider.
Yeah, those arbitrary boundaries certainly come into play, and I would think that it would be dependent on the type of infrastructure we're talking about.
Yeah.
Completely dependent on the type of thing. I think the other thing I'd like to throw out there, I think one of the reasons why, you know, we have a mandate given to us by the province, and we have a responsibility as a regional infrastructure committee to bring something towards the board from a recommendation perspective. And I think we also have timing up against this. This is not a pressure statement, but we are at a stage with this potential piece of infrastructure where levels of government that are coming to the funding table will be looking to some of our determination and some of our discussion, and ultimately the decision of the board probably to help decide where this fits, whether we decide upon our own again, determination, or whether the province steps in and makes some decision for us. So this is, you know, unless I'm incorrect, this is very much will be linked to funding, because any piece of infrastructure, and let's talk about the aquatic center, will have other levels of funding associated with it, other than just our municipalities. And I say the capital region municipality, because there's no way any of us, including Fredericton, are going to build it without. It's just not gonna happen. It's just too costly. You know, and there's too many demands on all of us, whether small or large. So, this is where, you know, I'll put on my Garrett hat that I want to be fair in the way Arcadia Act as well. I want to be fair in that, understanding that, our role here is to help grow our entire region. Period. Any other thoughts? That's a thought, this is a random thought.
Mr. Chair, did you?
What do you have?
Well, I was just, wanted to show the new formula, but maybe that's not the right time for it. And this is being broadcasted too, right?
Yes, yeah, maybe, yeah, we can share those, but I mean.
No, I don't know, no, we're talking, like, we're here to discuss, and you know,
We're not hypothetical numbers, I guess.
we're not on a
Just
round,
have to make sure that people
in
understand.
hypothetical numbers, and we're on a roundabout at some point, we're gonna have to take an exit. So, let's discuss.
So through you, Mr. Chair, on the discussion on how this model could be considered for regional and sub-regional assets, depending on how heavy the discount is on the factors. That would basically rule out, if you choose high discounts, folks that are beyond a certain travel time and distance, basically. And hence, it would be a regional asset, but folks would not be contributing. And as you adjust those numbers up or down, this is where you can determine that piece. So
Then I think to that, it's not just the time to travel, but it's the similar assets that play a bigger factor for me. So, you know, if Nakoik decided they wanted to build a field house, that's fine. Maybe there's communities closer to Nakoik to which the distance travel formula is plays a bigger part, but there's also communities that might say, hey, we have our own similar assets, so they're gonna get that credit to the point where perhaps Fredericton and Oromocto won't pay anything in that case, for example, or anyone who has a similar asset. But it might benefit because of how it's calculated, the quote unquote sub-region more, and those people will pay their fair share because they know they're gonna use it because they're closer and they don't have those assets. So that's where I go back to that formula, can almost play the decision maker, because we can talk around what's regional, what's sub-regional till the cows come home, but what it's really about is money.
So two things on that, the model accounts for, assets offering similar services. And again, last time we went away with the impression that there wouldn't be one size fitting all for even cost sharing. It could be looked at differently depending on the asset. So there's flexibility where the infrastructure committee and the board could assign a different factor for like assets.
Right.
And it could be 100% discount if you choose to. It could be 50, it could be 0. So it's flexible. So the difference in this formula is that we looked at travel distance along with the time, and we came up with the average of the distance. Then we worked out the average of both distance and time, right? And this would be the average of distance and time for each community. And applying, depending what you want to apply for factors too, if you want to give 3.5% discount on every point above the average, that gives you a certain discount. Bring your attention to this number. Just focus on this number here. NACWIC, for example. So if you allow 3.5% discount on every unit above the collective average of 29.9.
So that collective average is both time and distance.
Correct. They would get 85% discount. Say you went to a 4%. Oh, let's see your keyword. Oh, there it is. Then where's the discount? And then it's 97%, right? So say you went to a 5%, it's going to be positive now.
But that's a case, Jihad, where I looked and say you leave it at 3.5, but then NACWIC has a similar asset and you have it at 80%. They're gonna net out at 0, right?
Yes, so if you.
So we don't argue over whether it's regional anymore. It is, they just don't have to pay anything by virtue of those two factors.
Correct. So if we add, that they would have a similar asset, they're netting out at 0 basically.
Right. Then it takes this argument over whether it's regional or not regional right out based on the factors that seem fair. I heard everybody thought those factors were fair last week. We just have to make sure we refine them, because I do agree that to some extent the similar asset has to be maybe looked at a little bit in the sense of, yes, Oromocto may have a pool, but they can't run all the programs. So what factor does that play? I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that it's an 80% discount. Maybe it's only a 70% discount because we can't offer competitive programs on a regular basis. I'm not sure. That's something that we could flush out. One thing that strikes me is, well, if you want to look at it, what is the user percentage in the area and apply it at the time that you're looking to build this project. So if we had 6% of all the users of a pool, then maybe we discount the 80% by 6%. By virtue of boiling that all out, it works 75%. That's fair, because I'm not going to say a pool's a pool to your point in terms of that, but And that could apply to any type of asset. A gym is a gym is a gym. No, it's not.
What level's using them?
Right, a rink, no, same thing. I mean, does it seat 6,000 or 600 or, because again, that all applies, so. That's where I feel like we don't need to spend a whole lot of time in my mind arguing over, is this regional or is this not? Because we're gonna do that every time and take forever, but if you can build it into the formula, it does it for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's just some context around regional facilities and this committee's responsibility legislatively. The regulation states that this committee is responsible for developing a list of regional infrastructure, recommending to the board that it be classified regional, and if the board agrees, then on through to administer. There are 5 specific areas that this committee needs to address in determining whether or not a piece of infrastructure is regional. That's the ease of access throughout the region, whether or not it's unique, and we've had discussion about that. The scale and variety of activities that can be held inside the facility as compared to other facilities in the region. Also the number of groups and associations that use the facility and whether they come from inside or outside the region, and the impact of the infrastructure on the region overall. What isn't there is cost sharing. That's a completely separate discussion. If the piece of infrastructure is deemed to be regional, then costs are shared. And regions can develop their own formula for sharing. But if they can't, in the absence of that, if negotiations fall apart, then it'll be paid 50% of population, 50% on tax base. These are 2 separate issues. So to say this will be regional if we can come to an agreement on how it's paid is or suggest self-serving, not in accordance with the legislation.
I think, you know, here around the table here today, physically, virtually is, you know, we put time and thought and a lot of discussion around using cost because that impacts our respective communities the most. And coming up with a framework that out of those 5 items, there's elements of what we put into the formula that helps us determine whether it's fair and fair, when we put equitable or not. Including like facilities, including distance, including time, and whatnot. I keep hearing that and seeing some nods about the framework, but also knowing and recognizing that we do have a determination we have to make whether something is regional, not because of the legislative side of things. And when we start putting in numbers and working through this framework and not putting in different figures and discounts or whatnot, whether certain communities net out or not, we are obviously going back to a cost sharing formula, but also suggest looking at no matter what we do on on an aquatic center, let's use the aquatic center as the example. We're always going to come back to this discussion or not, and the requirements for this committee and up until the board is determining whether it is regional. Because that determination is going to have to be made. That's our responsibility. And I am never one to be a victim. So I don't like anybody imposing anything on myself. So, you know, the best case scenario is that we make a determination as the Canadian board, or, you know, in a reasonable time frame so that we don't put it to the province and the minister to make determinations for us. And we do it with the best efforts put forward by this group. And I think we are making great progress in terms of a model that might work to make these determinations, but the net of it is we will have to make a determination. And when is the right time to go to the board with what work we've done and present to them? Because we've had great dialogue here, and put a lot of thought, and I think Jan and the team for everything they've done as well. But But it's going to come to a point where we have to take it to the vote. Do you have your?
I was gonna add on the like for like or similar facilities, we also considered, the asset not being owned by the municipality, because a lot of times a not-for-profit group is running a recreational asset that's not owned by the municipality, it's fully accessible to the public and it offers similar. So when we're considering like the discounts for like facilities, I would love to hear from the board, from the committee here, what their thoughts on if it's accessible to the public in the committee, regardless of who owns it, whether the municipality owns it or not. So that's a good point that I would like to hear input on, because a pool in Ormocto last time it was brought up that it's not owned directly by the municipality. However, the public have access to it and it's in their community. So how does that fit into play?
As chair, I generally like to try to sit back, doesn't sound like it, but it has to be accessible, or else we would never even come close to qualifying as regional in my opinion.
No, I agree, because that makes sense, it's reasonable, right? I mean, I think if you wanna go back to what, you know, provincial bureaucrats are trying to tell us is that, you know, we've created pillars and we're building it into the formula, not because I find it self-serving, but because it's reality. If somebody tells you, do you think this is regional? I don't know, do I have to pay for it? No, okay, yes. Yes, I have to pay for it to the tune of 50-50, which isn't fair. Nothing's regional to Oromocto then. I don't want to end up in that position because it's not fair. But if somebody's gonna force me to, I have no problem taking that position. But I'm here to be open and say, hey, I want to find a way forward that works for everybody in a way that benefits us all as we're trying, but the reality is it's about money.
And I would go to that, just that statement we asked what G had about accessibility, so it comes back to things. It goes to the point on governance. That's why governance is a really important part of this discussion as well, to ensure that from a facility and infrastructure perspective, the decisions are made and recommended to the board and brought forth to the province and set in stone from a piece of infrastructure that we as a board and as a committee have a role in its governance, so that things can't change down, or change with oversight down, adjust with oversight down. I don't want to say can't change. Things have to change or they become stagnant and stale and non-suiting. They should be revisited and with a proper governance infrastructure in place. And that's why, you know, I'll be the dead horse when it comes to governance. It's important that we are always on top of these things, regardless of what was deemed regional 10 years ago. 10 years time, we have to play an active role under whatever, under this model that's put in place that is a governance perspective. What happens to change and adjust.
Oh, I agree with that, and what you're saying is the light facility is where the issue is. Because the only difference between that pool that's on the base, it's on CFB Gagetown, it's a big pool, plus they have an outdoor pool and everything else. The only difference between that pool and the regional one that's gonna be built in Fredericton is competitive swimming. The only difference. You learn to swim. If I'm in Burton, you wanna learn to swim, you go to CFB Gagetown pool through the leisure services and Oromocto to learn to swim program. So if I'm in the Burton Gary area that's 10 minutes from that pool, am I gonna travel all the way in to register? And how much extra fees do I have to pay because I'm coming out of the area going into Fredericton? I'm a big ball of hockey. I use hockey. Recreational hockey pays the same amount of money to the King Zero Arena that competitive hockey does. The only difference in competitive parents travel all over and they pay more money, but they're paying the same ice time. Right? The same as in Fredericton, we have the AAA programs. they're paying the same amount of ice time to use the facility at Willie O'Ree. But to be part of that program, you pay a lot more money. The same as competitive swimming. If you're on a competitive swimming team, and they did have competitive swimming at CFB Gate Sound, it was called they had a program there that they did, and so that's all part of who it is. So to say to the town of Oromocto, you're gonna pay this amount of money, when we have access for our residents, and you're gonna get an awful lot of push-up. And that's where this whole thing has to be sold. Correct, I'm in sales, you have to sell something in order to get everybody in agreement, so it's gotta be a realistic ask. So that even Arcadia, I mean, the people swimming there, you go in the summer, you're gonna go down and jump in the river, or you use your back pool, or come to CFB Gates, which they have options for, aqua size and everything else is done at the pool at CFB Gates. So, and most of the people Octo and side are military personnel.
I'll just add one thing to that, and get you to Kate. Capacity is, in my opinion, also important, you know, with the growing population of a region. So, you know, some pools are likely going to fall off the list. And capacity to serve the population with all these types of programming is quite important. You know, having heard that certainly from parents in the last year or so in terms of the difficulty of getting into certain pools at certain times, it can be very, very hard. So, Director Rogers?
Yeah, I think that was the point I was going to make. My understanding, and it sort of gets to Jihad's question about, do these need to be municipally owned or nonprofit or owned by an organization? And I think what we see is the pools that are not owned by the municipality aren't available to the public in the same sort of way. I know that we hear all the time from people who are using the Fredericton pools from Oromocto. It's because there's just not the number of hours being made available to the public for public programming. And since COVID, that has worsened. They don't have a competitive swim team in Oromocto any longer. My understanding, part of it is not being able to get pool time. So I feel that if it's municipally owned, that we're then making it that we then can control how often it's open to the public, and we can offer a lot more public programming. And it's funny, John, when you said this is all about cost sharing. For me, this is all about opportunity. Like, I see a regional asset like this, what that's going to do for all of our communities. There are going to be people in our communities that have never gone to a pool before because they haven't had easy access, that they're going to start doing different aqua programs. And because of the location that we're looking at, it's so much more central than coming into the city. It's, you know, so I believe that there's just lots and lots of opportunity for the region for a center like this that is programmed by municipal level of government. That's whole goal is to provide recreation to its residents. So
That's a sales pitch, not competitive.
it was not intended to be a sales pitch. Just aspirational. That's how I roll. I like look, we're paying 12 million. I mean, it's costing us a bloody fortune, but
I
it's
agree.
going to deliver a lot.
That's the sales pitch you have to do, that it's available for everybody, not competitive. As far as I'm concerned, your competitive swim thing is probably in the vicinity of 40 people. The people that first started the regional pool were all part of the competitive swim program. They couldn't sell snow to Saudi Arabia, to tell you the truth, and I said that on their Zoom meeting. So you have to do the whole area, that you have to do that, and it has to be sold properly, so that what you just said is correct.
That accessibility.
It's accessibility and it's available to everybody else, but don't be telling somebody that's going to the base pool that getting the service that they want, they have to now come to the regional pool because it's a new facility. That don't work.
But maybe you can get your 10 o'clock swim on a Saturday now where you couldn't get before.
And that may be just 2 people out of how many people in town of Oromocto? 10,000? That don't sell either. Like, it's the same as I can play AAA hockey, pay me $8,500, or I can play high school hockey and pay $2,000. That's a choice a parent makes. That's what they make, not us as a group.
Yes.
It's not often a choice though, right? It's often a necessity because they can't afford more too. So that's the other beauty of a municipally owned or in a regional asset like this. We can deliver programming more affordably to everyone, to everyone.
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you. Just one point, passing because I can't let it go. In Saudi Arabia, they did build an indoor ski hill, though. You know, so you talk about uniqueness of assets and selling things.
More money.
You know, more money. But that being said, just try to look at things. So part of our other mandated services when we're looking as a region, we have economic development. Employers coming into the region, what are they looking for? They're looking for assets, they're looking for value. They're looking, what do you have for support for the business, of course, that's the first and foremost. They're looking at your community, your support community. And then a lot of them are looking at what is it that your region has to offer in terms of sport, cultural and recreational assets, right? And we've done some work on that. We've got more to do, but we're gonna get there. So, but we hear that also through physician and healthcare recruitment. Not everybody wants to live, you know, and this is no slight to the city, right in the core of the city. Some want to be out in, you know, Minto Chipman, closer to the biking trails out there. Some want to be closer to, you know, as they call it often, I hear the people coming in nature. But we are also starting to develop a regional immigration strategy. We know that we're growing, and a lot of it is newcomers in terms of whether they're, you know, coming from other areas of Canada or North America or internationally around the world. And what are they looking for? In all fairness, somebody said, you know, that they're looking for ease of access to things that they've never had before. We also have to think of our own communities. How do we get there? We've developed in this community with a 25-meter pool, we've developed Olympic caliber swimmers. So we do have, you know, this asset really, to me, is an amazing, you know, would be an amazing asset because you don't want to start traveling too awfully far. If something does happen to the Beaverbrook pool, what is that alternative? What does that future look like? What does that hope look like for those that may be displaced? The other side of that coin is this particular asset also would have 3 different pools that could have multiple things happening at any one time, as we talked about in the visioning session. This is not just about a one tank, or I guess most of the 50s are 2 tanks, but to be technical, but it's not a one tank solution. This is 3 different opportunities to have multiple things happening at any one given time. So when we look at that, we go, okay, is it ease of access and uniqueness of the infrastructure to the region? Not a lot of others. The only one we're talking about is Oromocto having a similar or like asset in some way. You know, in terms of that, the scale and the variety of the sport, yes, it could offer a wide range, including, you know, when we look at it, aquatic therapy opportunities as well. You look at the number of groups and associations from within and outside the region that use it on a regular basis. This does have still the capacity to grow those opportunities within the region. Not everything can happen Monday to Friday after 5 p.m. or before, you know, 8 a.m. in the morning. There has to be a balance there, but you have a full facility that's accessible, you know, probably, you know, through that 9 to 5 or 8 to 5 or 8 to 4 period, whatever. The impact of the infrastructure on the region, including whether it benefits the population as a whole. I grew up in a small town, and my big thing was hockey and tennis. And we had access to those. But I also had many relatives that lived just beyond the border of that town, and they were paying a premium. As you had mentioned, Director Forsyth, to get in, those were choices that parents had to make. When you have that accessibility from a regional level, I think that gives it a whole lot of uniqueness and a whole lot of, gravitas, if you will, for looking at it within that frame. I'm not trying to sell anybody on anything, but I think from what I'm hearing around the conversation, I think, Mr. Chair, if I may, I think what we should have is Jihad and his team look at this with a frame and actually put what this frame would look like in terms of that governance, ownership, maintenance, operation. We've discussed that, but we never got into the nuts and bolts. So I think we should look at that. And then.
Can I go to the point you were
Yes.
just talking about? So look at that, can I add, and we said this, Director Forsyth, you said this. What does it look like? What demographic, what population does it serve beyond competitive? We hear competitive, that narrows way down at the bottom of the scale as much as a lot of our folks. As a parent, I like to think as my child is competitive in a lot of things, but basically, he's gonna swim the rest of his life. He's never gonna make it to the end of the pool in any record-beating time. But he's gonna stay afloat.
So he doesn't drown.
We basically, because we live close to water, but, I think it's important for me to hear, and I think all of us around the table here, even though we've seen pieces of it, as well as the overall board, what a regional aquatic center brings from a perspective of for the demographic and population that's within a region, beyond competitive swimming, the kind of things like aquatic, whatever you call them, therapy, all those things, because perhaps with that, and some of that is in these reports. But reports are great for sitting on tables or starting fires. Sometimes we just need to hear it in a discussion so that we can, in our own mindset, go, I've heard this in my community. I've heard my neighbor next door. I heard this in a community session that, one of the things that's missing here to retain people is access to this. And this was not a discussion on competitive swimming. This was aquatic therapy came up in the discussion with the doctor or with someone that left because, there's nothing here for me. And that one nothing was not a liquor store next door. It was an aquatic center within a reasonable distance, because we're all out there as leaders within our communities talking to our residents and have our residents talking to us. It could stimulate ourselves to be open for this discussion of what's regional infrastructure or not from the context of the aquatic center. So on top of governance, on top of maintenance, on top of operations, that what is a regional, what does it bring?
Mr. Chair, if I may, in the fall, we had re-engaged with the user groups that participated in, I guess, some of the feasibility study. We re-engaged those groups and expanded that a slight bit in some areas because people change, right? As we go, oftentimes we follow our children through sport and whatever that may be in their interest, and we volunteer and we help and we coach and we become those leaders in the communities in other ways. And they're out there and we look at this and we go, okay, maybe, Director Duplessis, the Director Duplessis was out there, he was coaching this for this period of time. And then, he takes a leave of absence and maybe then it's Director Forsyth or maybe it's Grant or John or somebody, but we come through these. So we went back out and chatted, took those interests into consideration, and there was still ways to accommodate everybody's needs within the scope of what we were looking at. So I just want to state that for the record. We can come back with some information on that, provide that within the jihad and the other. Look at this as well.
Go ahead. Roger.
Yeah, I was actually want to point out what John just mentioned. My understanding was all those groups when the feasibility study was done, that all of those groups were engaged and that we would have that information from silver dolphins to the divers to the kids who were taking the swim lessons to all of that. I think there were lots of different stakeholders that were engaged that would represent a lot of the different programming. I don't know about the therapeutic programming aspect, if that was included, because obviously that's something that does occur at the various pools that would also take place up in the new center. So some of that work, that should be pretty easy to do, I guess, is what I'm saying, because I think a lot of it's been done. I wasn't aware if this group had seen that feasibility study or not, but I think a lot of that has been done. And can be made available. The other, I guess I'm at a point, when I listen to what Don says, when he reads the definition about what's regional infrastructure, to me, it's really, I just can't, to me, it's so clear that this is regional. And it's also so clear that we have to get a funding formula that is fair so that people, I don't think anyone can deny this will be the only facility of its type in the region. I think everyone's concern is how much it's going to be used by their residents that are putting money towards it. And so I think our focus, I would rather just call it what it is, a regional facility, and put our focus into finding a funding formula that everyone can be comfortable with so that we're the ones dictating our funding formula as opposed to having the province tell us what it's going to be. Because that's something I don't want. I would like us to be able to figure this out amongst ourselves. And I think as Sarah mentioned last week, Fredericton's always going to be by far the biggest payer. So I'm not as concerned as concerned as others might be, but I very much appreciate why you are and hope that we can figure out something that makes everyone comfortable. But I would like us to we need to move forward or we're going to miss another season, right? Like pretenders should be getting out. I don't want us to feel pressured, but at the same time, every week that we're not putting a tender out is the inflation is just going up and up and up. We all see it in all the builds in all of our communities. So I think we just need to move. Like, let's make a decision about what it is and then figure out the cost sharing. Because we can imagine what the user groups are. I've just listed most of them. I don't want us to just keep making excuses for not determining that this is a piece of regional infrastructure.
So in terms of next steps and direction, so we're coalescing around some things we need to just give us a summary of what it is we're doing.
Yes. So Mr. Chair, I think that's a
Yes.
question.
That is a question.
In terms of, more so in the statement. So what we'll undertake to do is reframe all the conversation, look at it from the perspective of the guidelines, the legislation, look at it from the perspective of regional, sub-regional, and look at it from options on the other pieces. We'll work with Shahad and his team and our project managers on this and our steering committee. We can have all of that readily available and form our report before the next meeting in March and come back. And if we do that, and just so that everyone's aware of the time frame. I may as well just put that out there again. So the time frame is we have to report on or before June 30th of 2024 in terms of how we're moving forward, which Don and I were chatting, and in order to meet the June requirement of the meeting, realistically, we're looking at no later than about the third week. I think we said Don, the third week of May.
Yes.
In order to have that ready for the June meeting. So we have to, I think what we need to do is kind of think about what we heard here today. Let's put a different looking package together, come back, meet and do it in pieces. And then I think then that way we can achieve success together. And I think really what we need to, and we can share the copy. It was sent in the visioning session piece, but we'll share the copy around the committee structure, in terms of bringing forward the motion. We'll look at the piece on the general regulation and then the legislation, and just so that everybody's aware, not trying to over-inundate the paper, and then we'll look to put together a very simple, simplified but yet concrete report that gives us options in which the board may be able to, the committee may be able to make a recommendation to the board.
And if I could just make one comment. So I spent quite a bit of my professional career in marketing and product management. Just, I got squared into that hole for a while. Reports are great, but if there's anything we can do to help put a face to the populations that are receiving the services that our regional infrastructure give, to put context for this committee and the board, personalized, I think would be powerful. So reading a report is great. The population, what is happening here? What difference does it make to my community? Or communities, because we're talking about a lot of things happening at an aquatic center, more than just can you get to that into that pool in 2 seconds? You know, it's life-changing activities from a therapy perspective. It's life-saving skills or life-saving skills for children from ages of 3 months up. It is, well, I can go on and listen, but I can't remember the rest of the things I'm going to say, but there's a list of them that I can't even think of because I don't know.
But you know, you talk about life saving skills, and if you talk to any senior aquatic people, like, you know, I'm thinking like Royal Life Saving Society of Canada, like, and they've been involved, you know, obviously pretty seriously in advocating for pools. The greatest thing that pool builders or municipalities leave out is that need for drowning prevention. And we undersell that over and over and over, and how that's a responsibility of governments to ensure that that takes place. And everything that goes on in a pool contributes towards that. And that's just something we keep in mind as well, right? When you talk about marketing and stuff, is the onus on governments to ensure drowning prevention.
Well, I know from my personal community, with the amount of water that we face, whether it's Grand Lake or the St. John River, it's on the mind of municipal councilors quite a bit. Water, whether from a fire department perspective or from a summer tourism perspective. And you know, I saved my sister, 6 years old from that, so it's top of mind to, for me myself. And it's a to your point, it gets underscored, sorry, not given enough credit so many times, the importance that aquatics training and life-saving skills bring to communities. And we are a region full of water, lakes, rivers, drains, and I just don't want to let that go.
I have a question on just with the formula, we're working our thing out, that's good. The design and proposal that's been undertaken thing, that's been paid for by feds in the province, I think, or somebody. But going forward on this 55 million, 65, 7, depends on when we put it out to tender, how much more money it is. Has that provincial and federal guaranteed of the third been solidified? Because we're coming in to do elections. One's a provincial one, one's a federal one. So I'm just curious of that fact. Is that anywhere in writing signed by? No, it's
We have
not.
to have the architectural and design phase completed before we can make an application to those. All levels of government are aware of this particular project from an interest level. We actually, in our consultation piece, when we were doing this in the fall, that Director Rogers alluded to, and I've spoken about, we actually had representatives from federal and provincial political entities attend, and we welcome them. We have limited space in this room, but we did welcome them. Have those conversations. People are fully aware. To say that that it's automatic, well, it's like anything. But we have to know what that looks like, what it costs. At least a good estimate of what it costs. Be ready for getting ready for tender ready documents, and we also have to ensure that we know long before that how does the structure work? Is it regional? And that's what we need to make those applications. So that process, it follows this. And this is why this part of the journey is so important to the end result, hopefully, which will be, an asset.
But
Yeah.
the study that everybody paid for, or the feds and come aboard, didn't come out from anybody, it was just from the feds.
You mean the feasibility study?
Feasibility study.
Foresight? I think, Don, you were here.
So the feasibility study, Mr. Chair, was a project of the Regional Service Commission. A grant was made from tourism, culture, and heritage grant help with that. And then taking communities here, I'll call it the region, the close proximity participating, as well as the province on behalf of the LSDs that were part of the recreation service agreement with the city of Fredericton.
Part of that piece is not stuff.
So that came out with the study and the cost and saying to move forward to this thing and move forward to
And,
that.
and we did receive some additional funding from the federal and provincial governments through the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, which is a cost share program to assist with the architectural design phase, which we're in now with the support of the communities of Oromocto, the city of Fredericton, the village of Fairland, the rural community of Hanwell, and of course, Capital Region Rural District at that time represented by the province, now through yourself and your team. And so that those are the contributors right now to move the project to continue forward. And then we have to, again, that's why this part of the juncture is so important, because it will tell us what the next phase is like.
Well, we can't apply for the funding unless we know this, we have to have all these determinations, right? To apply for the fund. That, like, yeah, I guess that's why my sense of urgency, I want to, I want to get tenders out, I want to apply for money, know what we're dealing with, but we can't do any of that until we make this decision. But what I'm hearing is we'll get more information and then make that decision in March to then take forward to the board. Is that what we're looking at now?
I certainly think we'd be able to, oh, sorry, Mr. Chair.
No, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, through you to the members, I think, Director Rogers, what we're talking about is getting that, a new frame around the materials, to look at this in a piece by piece format and have that discussion in March. If it leads to a decision to make a recommendation to the board, that would be great. But it may just be that conversation on what that looks like at that point in time, and maybe we'll prepare some of that further stuff out and continue that process. Like I say, we, internally, our clock, as one might say, is our kind of deadline to get a submission to the board would be sometime about the mid to not later than probably about the third week of May, in order to get it on for the board agenda in June to report back to the minister no later than the 30th of June. If we have something earlier, then we have something earlier and we can advance that as well.
Well,
Great.
the way the board works, I think I'd be working to try and get it for the 1st of May so that you have the June to cover up your butts.
I totally agree.
It's 4 months to get the budget through.
Yes,
And just in,
Totally agree.
if we, yes.
just the-
Totally agree. That's, yeah,
And I think whatever we do, it's good to keep, it's always nice to compare, I like the is not list, I like to compare and contrast. If we're not left to our own device to come up with an agreement here and it goes to the minister, we know what the formula is. We know what the cost would be if it's deemed to be a regional piece of infrastructure, and we can figure out those costs, right? So compare whatever we do from a model to what would potentially be imposed upon us. And
Yeah. we don't want that.
draw conclusions like this.
Yeah, and I'll just say, putting that hat on of Oromocto, that scares Oromocto because we're the ones that stand to lose the most.
Yeah.
We're the second biggest entity. Fredericton's fine, they can pay whatever, whenever.
That's so not true. We're not money bags.
Director Rogers, I know.
Jeez.
On the opposite side of that is, why does Tracy and Fredericton Junction care? 50-50 is good for them. It's not good for me.
No, it's not good
I'm
for you.
motivated,
Not
I'm
fair.
motivated to come up with a fair plan. I
Yeah.
totally agree with everybody's ambitions and is this regional, and what everybody's saying resonates with me, don't get me wrong. But I need to be able to go back and sell it to my director, because he's gonna say no, 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 until such time as I can say, well, no, it's not that bad, it's fair.
Yeah.
I think that's fair. And again, I go back to our guiding principles we all came up with here last year. All the efforts and discussions and turning this topic over from every different angle. is part of the process we should be going through. And no one's pulling themselves in the corner saying, no, just let's keep turning it over till we have something we can really truly have a good discussion about. And bring to a vote, because that's what we're going to get. It's gonna come down to it. So we have to feel, I have to just feel confident that we, as a director of the organization, that, we put our effort into just achieving this with the framework we've been given. So with that, I think we have some next steps. Right? Yeah. Any further questions? I know I took a little bit more time than it's today. But again, it's dialogue. It's extremely important.
Thanks, Mr. Chair.
So, can I get a motion for adjournment?
Move.
No. No, all in favor? Aye. Adjourned. All right,
Thanks.
great.